Now, for step 3, we're going to actually hoist the cables. Very exciting. So we're going to use our leftover cable to create a hoisting loop. And the cable should be of the same size, and make sure to never reuse a hoisting loop amongst projects, especially because the clamps and the cable will deform over time and get damaged by the clamps, as well as the clamps will loosen the cable over time, and we don't want to have catastrophic failure. So now we'll attach the hoisting loop to the main cable. The hoisting loops will use 2 clamps, and you should saddle the main cable. So the actual hoisting loop is getting deformed, not the main cable. And we'll attach this near the top at the tower. Finally, we'll hook the winch or cable puller onto the erection hook, which should be already cast into the anchor. We'll confirm that our auto levels are set up, and we'll secure the tail of the cable we're hoisting to another cable with 1 clamp. This is to make sure that if anything were to happen, that tail isn't going to whip around when if that winch failed, and won't whip around and hurt anybody. So we're then finally going to pull the cable until it is sufficiently between those F1 and F2 values by communicating via walkie-talkie. We'll then loosen the 2 clamps, and this is probably the most dangerous part of the process because the cable is fully on the winch. We'll loosen the 2 clamps, we'll feed the cable through the anchor, we'll retighten the clamps, and then we'll drop the cable onto those clamps by releasing the winch. And during this process, the cable will drop a little bit. And this is why we don't just hoist to the F2 value, because the cable doesn't stay exactly where we want it when we release that winch. We don't want to hoist above F1, so we hoist somewhere in between, ideally halfway in between. And we'll repeat this on each side and wait 24 hours before we even think about setting sag, so that some of the construction stretch can come out of the cable. And this is because over time with force, finally this cable is being loaded for who knows how long it's been since it's been loaded. And as that happens, the strands in the cable actually start to settle into the interstitial spaces between the strands. And as this reduction in area happens, the actual stretch of the cable will change over time. So we want to let that stretch out.
Okay, here we.
Now,
Making the.
this is a video with me making us making the hoisting loop.
Yeah, it doesn't.
You need a couple people to hold the cable down.
Okay, here we
And now
are.
here's a video of the attaching.
Setting up the hoisting loop on our first cable we plan on hoisting. Keegan is still rowing the boat.
And notice how the saddles of the clamps are on the main cable, protecting it, and the deforming is happening to the hoisting loop. And we'll actually mark this with spray paint, so we know if the hoisting loop is sliding or moving at all during the hoisting process, so we can have a hard stop, we can release the cable, and make sure that everything is safe before proceeding. And then in this final video, I'll show you the full setup we'll use to actually hoist the cable. Unfortunately, I didn't get any footage of different angles of the cable being hoisted, but during this process, we're in constant communication with our team who is surveying, and as you hoist the cable, it's going to bounce a little bit, so you got to go a little slow, and you got to make sure that you're sufficiently between those F1 and F2 values.
The middle of the erection hook is marked so that we know if it starts to move. So if anything is slipping and the cable is about to go, we know that we should stop work.
In this video, I say erection hook, and I mean hoisting loop. All right, and that concludes the step 3, which is actually hoisting our cables. We'll do this for each cable in turn, starting away from the river so that we don't block our view of the previous cables. So if we're looking from this direction, we want to be hoisting from away from us first and then come inward so we don't block our view.